Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Rupinder Syal and welcome again to Spartan Tutorials. So at the turn of the 20th century and the end of 19th century, biologists had pretty much figured out the three major nutrients required by humans and other organisms for proper metabolism. Okay, so those nutrients were carbohydrates, proteins and lipids. Okay, all the 20 amino acids had been discovered and it was thought that pretty much we had figured it out. And Robert Koch's theory about microbial transmission of disease was also very popular, and people were figuring out the causes of many microbial, bacterial, as well as at the turn of the 20th century many viral diseases also, tobacco mosaic virus, etc. So we had pretty much figured it out, but there were still some diseases which nutritionists had found out by giving diets to animals which were only restricted to some food sources. Although they had pretty much adequate and even more than required carbohydrates, proteins and lipids, but still these animals developed diseases, and biochemists around the world were in this intense race, including many in India. Actually, they were pretty close and they made important contributions in figuring out what are these elusive nutrients, because these are pretty much required in very tiny quantities. That's why most of the earlier studies could not uncover them. Okay, so what were these hidden nutrients that were so important for metabolism, that were leading to debilitating diseases, devastating diseases if they were not provided in our diet? People had tested earlier with corn diets only, or wheat diets only, or rice diets only, and they found that people developed some diseases if they only depended on those. If they had a varied diet, they avoided those. So what were those nutrients? So at the turn of the 20th century, there was this intense race about finding out these nutrients, and today we are going to talk about that race and what are the important functions of these elusive nutrients. And stay around till the end of the lecture, because we are going to talk about a particularly important nutrient of that sort, which is a crazy supplement today, which is probably a waste of your time and money. Let's get started. Alright, so let's get started. And as you might have already guessed, these tiny elusive nutrients were vitamins. We have already discussed the lipid soluble or fat soluble vitamins in our previous lecture. So if you haven't watched that, please do watch it. So we are going to talk about water soluble vitamins here. And water soluble vitamins are basically majorly two: the B complex vitamins as well as the vitamin C. Okay, and we will discuss them each one by one. These are fascinating vitamins because they provide a window into how our metabolism actually works and why do we need them in so tiny amounts. Okay, so let's get started. So the first vitamin that we have is thiamine, or vitamin B1. This was one of the first vitamins ever found by the efforts of a scientist called Christian Eichmann. Who was discovering the cause of a disease called peripheral neuritis. This was a hugely debilitating disease. It was found in many colonies of Europe, Java, Indonesia and Sri Lanka, and the disease that it caused was beriberi. It is actually derived from a Sri Lankan term which means I can't walk. Okay, so you can see how painful and crucially deforming this disease was. Okay, so vitamin B1, what does it play the role in metabolism? So vitamin B1 actually plays a crucial role in carbohydrate metabolism. It is a cofactor, and that's why these vitamins are required in very small amounts, because these are not used up in metabolism. Proteins, carbohydrates and lipids, they get used up. We make stuff out of it or we get energy out of it, and we basically consume them. But vitamins, they can keep on getting recycled again and again for various enzymes. So the actual active form of vitamin B1 is called TPP, which stands for thiamine pyrophosphate. thymine pyrophosphate, and this is the cofactor of many enzymes. I will just give you a few examples. Trans-ketolase, very important for pentose phosphate pathway. Pentose phosphate pathway is a very important pathway because it generates two very essential nutrients. One is NAD, which we require for synthesis purpose, NADP+, and also ribose and deoxyribose, which cells need if they are dividing very fast. So these become the raw materials for formation of new DNA and new RNA. So rapidly dividing cells, for example, cells in our intestines, and cells which are involved in sterol metabolism or steroid hormone biosynthesis, they need this pathway in a very crucial amount. So trans-ketolase is one enzyme, okay, thymine pyrophosphate. Okay, we will see other enzymes also. Another one is called pyruvate decarboxylase. This is involved in ethanol fermentation, and the most important probably the enzyme is the pyruvate dehydrogenase complex, PDH, pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. And as many of you might be aware, this is the link between glycolysis and Krebs cycle. Pyruvate dehydrogenase complex. So TPP is one of the cofactors for pyruvate dehydrogenase complex, and if TPP is not provided, vitamin B1, thiamine is not provided in our diet in adequate amounts, what happens is there is build up in the blood, there is accumulation in the blood of pyruvate, and that leads to huge problems. Okay, there are many diseases associated with that, and as I said, Christian Eichmann as well as Sir Frederick Hopkins, they got the Nobel Prize for discovering and characterizing the role of vitamin B1 in metabolism. Very important result. This is the deficiency disease of vitamin B1. If it is not provided in adequate amounts, it causes this disease called beriberi. And another disease associated with vitamin B1 deficiency is Wernicke encephalopathy, which is basically a kind of psychosis, and this affects people who are heavy alcoholics, because what happens is that the alcohol, when we ingest it in very large amounts, it interferes with absorption of vitamin B1 in our gut. So people who are heavy abusers of alcohol, they usually suffer from Wernicke encephalopathy, or also known as Korsakoff psychosis, right? So vitamin B1, very essential nutrient. Okay, coming to vitamin B2, this is riboflavin, very important, especially for the flavin part, because riboflavin is involved in formation of these two compounds, flavin mononucleotide and flavin adenine dinucleotide, and these are very important electron carriers. So the whole process of electron transport chain or oxidative phosphorylation is heavily dependent on NADH as well as FMN and FAD. So very important for central energy yielding metabolism of our cells, especially in the mitochondria. Okay, so vitamin B2. The deficiency of vitamin B2, although it is rare, it causes sometimes desquamation, sometimes cheilosis. There is cracking of the skin around the lips, and some other symptoms. So that's the effect of vitamin B2 deficiency. Then we come to niacin. Niacin is actually a couple of different compounds, but the most important ones are nicotinic acid and nicotinamide. Okay, these are the two important active ingredients of niacin vitamin. So niacin is not just one compound, it is a mixture of compounds, and the fact that it has nicotinic acid and nicotinamide in its name does not mean that it is derived from nicotine. The only resemblance is the structure. Okay, so if you look at the structure of nicotine on Wikipedia, you can see that it has some similarities, but nothing beyond that. So it's not addictive, at least, right? And niacin is also very important, just like riboflavin, because niacin provides NAD and NADP, and it cannot get more important for our biochemistry than these two compounds. NAD is hugely important for getting energy. We take glucose, we take proteins and lipids, we convert them to acetyl CoA in Krebs cycle, and then we put them into electron transport chain and derive energy. NAD is important for that. NADP is the central compound or cofactor for anabolic reactions. So whatever we want to make in the cell, new DNA, new RNA, new sugar, new carbohydrates, new lipids, NADP is needed over there, and it cannot be formed without this moiety, which is niacin. Okay, so very important. Okay, so that's about niacin. And the disease of niacin deficiency is called pellagra or pellagra. This was a hugely problematic disease, and it is still in some parts of Western Ghats of India, even today in many rural impoverished communities. And pellagra actually derives from an Italian combination of words, pel and agra. Pel means raw and agra means skin. You can see this kind of burnt skin kind of phenomenon here, right, around the neck also. Okay, we don't know exactly how tissue specific things take place. This might be area for future research, but we do know that pellagra was caused by a deficiency of niacin, and many biochemists played a huge role, especially a scientist called Conrad Alvhem, in figuring out the exact cause of pellagra. Conrad Alvhem, and it caused a related disease called black tongue in dogs, and that's how the biochemical discovery was made regarding the connection between deficiency of niacin and pellagra. Pellagra was a hugely problematic disease in the south part of United States of America in the early part of the 20th century, because people were eating a diet very rich in cornmeal, and it was deficient in an essential amino acid, which is tryptophan. Because tryptophan can actually be metabolized in the cells to produce niacin, so a diet which is very poor in tryptophan, an essential amino acid, led to pellagra. And discovery of niacin and its characterization led to basically the elimination of pellagra in most of the parts of the world. Okay, vitamin B6. Vitamin B6 is actually a mixture of 6 compounds: pyridoxine, pyridoxal and pyridoxamine, as well as their phosphate forms, 5' phosphates. The active coenzyme is called PLP, pyridoxal 5' phosphate. Okay, that's the active enzyme. And the major reaction that pyridoxal phosphate takes part in is called transamination reaction. Hugely important for amino acid metabolism. Okay, so it is involved in the transfer of amino groups, okay, from the amino acids. So these are the different forms, and this is the crucial reaction here. So we have any type of amino acid that we put in our diet. Pyridoxal phosphate is the cofactor for these enzymes called aminotransferases, and it transfers the amino group to alpha ketoglutarate to form L-glutamate, and it leaves the rest of the amino acid alone, which is alpha keto acid. These are also recycled later on, but that's the fate. So this is basically the carrier group for all the amino acids. Okay, so glutamate is the main enzyme for that. Glutamate is the main product of that, and the aminotransferases are the main enzymes for that. Okay, coming to vitamin B12, very kind of rare enzyme, but still very important. It is found in as a cofactor in only 2 enzymes, but still it plays an important role in metabolism. It belongs to this family of compounds called cobalamins, because they have this unique ring which is called the Corin ring. And the compounds which contain this, they are known as corinoids. Okay. They have this cobalt ion which is coordinated to different nitrogen atoms, as well as this cyanide group in the middle. Okay, it is found only in foods of animal origin, even fermented foods, but definitely not in plant foods. So people who are strict vegans, they are at a risk of developing vitamin B12 deficiency. The technical name or the biochemical name for vitamin B12 is cyanocobalamin. And one of the Nobel laureates, Dorothy Hodgkin, she took this enormous task at that time to solve its structure using crystallography, which was a huge accomplishment at that time. Nobody had done this before, and she got the Nobel Prize for doing that. Okay, two enzymes where it plays a role. These are methionine synthase in bacteria, not in humans because we don't have this enzyme. Methionine synthase and methyl malonyl CoA mutase. Okay, these enzyme names can be sometimes really long, so I'm looking at my notes. All right. So methionine synthase and methyl malonyl CoA mutase. These are still very important enzymes in metabolism, and their deficiency causes pernicious anemia. And just like other vitamins, this was also a huge accomplishment for many scientists to discover the cause behind pernicious anemia. And three scientists, especially George Whipple, George Minot, and William Murphy, were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology of Medicine in 1934 for their discoveries regarding the cause of pernicious anemia and how to treat it. Okay, nowadays, actually, kids, they are given in small injection. The vitamin is kind of a red liquid. It is given at the birth or when somebody gets a deficiency, and this vitamin stays pretty long in the body and there is no deficiency. Right? Okay, then we come to folic acid. Folic acid is composed of these three major components. There is this pyridine kind of ring. Okay, don't need to remember the structure. Okay, we are not involved in that. Para-aminobenzoate, PABA, okay, and glutamate. Okay, and the active form of folic acid is tetrahydrofolate. Tetrahydrofolate. Okay, tetrahydrofolate. It is especially important for transfer of 1 carbon units. So, for example, methylene group or methyl group, transfer of 1 carbon units. Folic acid is very, very important for those. Okay. And one of the reactions that it is involved in, dihydrofolate reductase, is conversion of DUMP, deoxyuridine monophosphate, to TMP, which is the precursor or raw material for forming DNA, thymidylate monophosphate. So this is very important if DNA replication has to continue without any problems. An important note, about 400 micrograms per day of folic acid supplementation is usually prescribed to pregnant women when they are kind of beginning to think about conceiving a baby, and this prevents neural tube defects. Otherwise, the babies can be born with this debilitating disease called spina bifida. What happens is the neural tube at the back or the dorsal side does not close very well, and it leads to huge amount of neurological problems. Okay, and supplementation of folic acid has been proven to totally prevent that. Okay. And because dihydrofolate reductase is important for this DNA synthesis, it is also a target of many drugs. So, for example, methotrexate. This is an anti-cancer drug. It blocks dihydrofolate reductase. Similarly, trimethoprim. It is an antibacterial drug. Again, targeting dihydrofolate reductase, because there are important differences in dihydrofolate reductase between bacteria and humans. So if we inhibit bacterial, the human ones still can survive, can function pretty well. And another one, anti-malarial drug, which is called pyrimethamine. Okay, these are the three drugs which have been based on inhibition of dihydrofolate reductase. Okay. Then we come to biotin, very important coenzyme, synthesized by intestinal bacteria, pretty widely distributed in foods, so deficiency is pretty rare. It is a coenzyme of carboxylase enzymes. Okay, so there are a lot of carboxylase enzymes. I'm sure you must be familiar with some of them. For example, pyruvate carboxylase, which functions in gluconeogenesis. This is just one example. Gluconeogenesis, this takes part in. Then we have acetyl-CoA carboxylase. This is also very important because it is involved in fatty acid synthesis, sometimes abbreviated as ACC, acetyl-CoA carboxylase. Then we have methyl crotonyl-CoA carboxylase, which is involved in leucine metabolism. So you can see it affects carbohydrate metabolism, fatty acid metabolism, and as well as protein metabolism. So everywhere, right? So very important. It has this interesting structure. I don't think you are going to be quizzed on the structure. I hope not. But if you want, you can definitely remember it. But the conceptual understanding is more important. Another important vitamin is pantothenic acid. Very important because it contains, it is used in formation of coenzyme A and acyl carrier protein. Hugely important. Acyl carrier protein is involved in fatty acid biosynthesis. So you can see how fundamental it is, because you can't make plasma membrane if you don't have fatty acids, right? End of the story. Coenzyme A, very important. Acetyl coenzyme A is the major carrier of all the energy that we get from glycolysis, amino acid catabolism, fatty acid catabolism, and that is channeled into Krebs cycle by pyruvate to carboxyl acetyl CoA and other routes, and then it is used for energy generation in electron transport chains. Hugely important. Okay, vitamin C, very controversial and very, I don't know, there is a lot of craze, very popular, very Instagram worthy vitamin. Ascorbic acid, it is its technical name. It is an essential amino acid in only a few animals, especially primates, for example, some birds, humans, especially. Otherwise, other animals, bacteria, they can synthesize this pretty well. But we have this mutation in the delta gulonolactone oxidase. This is the enzyme which is involved in vitamin C biosynthesis normally, but for some reason we have evolved a mutation in this, or we have inherited a mutation into this, to say it pretty correctly, delta gulonolactone oxidase, and that's why we need to provide it in our diet. Okay. And this is also hugely important, and especially actually one of the first deficiency diseases of vitamin was scurvy, which is caused by vitamin C deficiency. And this was a huge problem. It caused, for example, gum decay, tooth loss, bone fractures, general weakness. People even used to have sometimes psychosis because of scurvy, and this was a huge problem in the early 19th century, even 18th century, because of all the explorers going from the Europe to different parts of the world, Africa, South America, Asia, and they were on the sea for 6 months, 8 months and longer. And what happened was, people used to run out of fresh fruits and vegetables, and one of the important components of fresh fruits and vegetables was vitamin C. Okay, so that's why it's very important for you to eat your green leafy vegetables as well as good fruits. And James Lind was one of the first scientists. There were other people who contributed to this analysis. James Lind was one of the first scientists who systematically tested different food materials to see which one could cure scurvy. And he found that a diet of limes was important for and was effective in treating scurvy, and that's why even today the British sailors, they are called limeys. You can check this, People who are watching from UK may be able to correct me. Okay, limeys, they are even today called limeys. Okay, that's the reference to this. All right. And Albert Szent Györgyi, he was a prominent biochemist, Hungarian biochemist. He got the Nobel Prize for discovering the structure as well as isolation of vitamin C. Alright, so that finishes our discussion of water soluble vitamins. I hope you liked it. And now for the bonus part. Okay, what about this craze of vitamin C supplementation? Okay, we have these ads which have like 500 milligrams, mega doses of vitamin C, although our basic biochemistry tells us that after 100 milligrams per day, our body can no longer absorb any more vitamin C. So why are we taking that? Actually, it all goes back to a very famous scientist, kind of the Steve Jobs of biochemistry. His name was Linus Pauling. You may have known him, but people of biochemistry, they probably know him as the founder of early eras of biochemistry, especially for discovering alpha helix and beta sheets. He wrote an influential book, The Nature of Chemical Bond, which was, an inspiration for Watson and Crick to solve the structure of DNA. Hugely popular figure, won the Nobel Prize twice, once in chemistry and once in peace, because he campaigned for reducing nuclear weapons and ending the nuclear arms race, which is pretty good. But the problem is, what happens sometimes is that people, especially, and it happens to all the humans, me, you, everybody, when they get very famous, they get very influential, and they sometimes may be wrong. But the problem is, now he has 2 Nobel Prizes. So if I say something and if Linus Pauling says something, he has more credibility, right? So he kind of met this crack or fraud researcher at a conference one time, and this researcher basically convinced him to try out mega doses of vitamin C, and he convinced him that it was the cure for everything, especially common cold, and aging and all sorts of diseases. And Linus Pauling, although he was a very famous scientist, very well-trained scientist, he kind of fell for this trap, and he kind of believed his own beliefs, although there were many clinical trials later on to show that actually vitamin C doesn't do anything apart from preventing vitamin C deficiency scurvy. But the people just believed him, and he wrote many influential books. And anytime doctors said, why are you recommending this, because patients asked their doctors, can you recommend me, or can you write a prescription for vitamin C? And they said, why are you doing that? It doesn't do anything. Said, no, Linus Pauling recommends it in his book. He has 2 Nobel Prizes. Do you have a Nobel Prize? Okay, so that was the issue at that time, and it still continues to this day. I'm still amazed at how many people still buy into, even for example, coronavirus. There was a lot of WhatsApp messages and fake news. Okay, take mega doses of vitamin C and that will cure everything. No, it doesn't. Right? You need controlled clinical trials to establish that. Okay, so as scientists, as people who are interested in science, and even as general public, we should be aware of these facts. Okay, so I hope today's lecture or today's video was useful to you guys. Please give me your feedback. How did you like it? Okay, hope to see you in the next lecture very soon. Take care and bye-bye.